When I was a teenager, I fucking hated Jonas. I hated this guy so much that instead of going out to a nightclub trying to get some like a normal hormonally imbalanced peach fuzz douche, I would spend my nights graffitiing 8 messages about Jonas on the walls of my small little city. No, don't click off this video just yet, because today I'm here to redeem myself. Long gone are the days when I used to be a hateful fan who only cared about the players of his club and deemed everyone that dared don a red shirt a literal enemy. So in this video, I'll showcase to the whole world the iconic career of the record-breaking lethal gunman Jonas. A man who, despite being a late bloomer plagued by injuries, never gave up on his dream of being one of the best Brazilian strikers of his generation. So after hearing his epic story full of ups and downs, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether he achieved it or not. But first, let me give you some context. Unlike what usually happens in the trajectory of a successful footballer, Jonas didn't go through any groundbreaking runs at youth level. In fact, he only played 1 year as a youth player for Guarani. Prior to that experience, Jonas' only contact with the sport was in local friendly tournaments with his buddies. He didn't learn the basics of positioning, ball control, finishing, nothing. Yet, he had it all. But this isn't a sub-story about how everyone ignored little boy Jonas. Not at all. In fact, one of Guarani's scouts, Donizete Lima, spent almost a decade trying to convince young Jonas to join his club and turn his potential into reality. But Jonas was always a family guy. He didn't want to be away from his family, so despite accepting the invitation, he would never last in any of those trials. Again, not due to a lack of talent, but simply because he would quit after a few days. Eventually, Jonas realized that time was running out and chances like the ones he had had 3 times already weren't going to last forever. He was about to turn 20, and if he wanted to go pro and leave his mark, this was the time to go big or go home once and for all. And after a little more than a year playing in Guarani's under-19s, Jonas debuted as a pro with immediate impact. Jonas saved Guarani from being relegated from Serie B and their state championship, finishing his first senior year as the league's second best goal scorer with 12 goals. Not bad for a rookie with no serious coaching. That obviously created some buzz, and with his contract running out, Jonas signed with the legendary Santos, where he would have the honor of scoring in front of his biggest reference in football, Brazil's king, Pelé. However, his tenure at Vila Belmiro wouldn't have a happy ending, as his past experience, or lack thereof, came back to bite him in the ass. Unlike his peers, Jonas had less muscle mass and physical fitness to endure the tough pro-Brazilian schedule. So before he even turned 22, the striker suffered a devastating injury that kept him out for over 7 months. That setback was one of the biggest reasons why his time with Santos wasn't as fruitful as one would hope, but at the same time, it opened the door to other opportunities to stand out and take his game to a completely different level. After that disappointing tenure with Santos, Jonas signed with Grêmio. It was his second chance at a big-time club, but the pressure got to his head and he simply couldn't stand out during that 1.5-year run. Perhaps as a preview of where his most successful days would come, Jonas went on loan to Portuguesa. Despite failing to avoid their relegation, Jonas regained his confidence, got his goal instincts back, and earned another chance to thrive with Grêmio. In 2009, Jonas returned to Porto Alegre and scored 24 goals, finishing as his club's top scorer once again. However, that year wasn't a bed of roses. Despite his decent stats, Jonas earned the unfortunate reputation of being the worst striker in the world, after an embarrassing miss in front of Colombian Minos Boyacá Chico. Besides, he was playing in Brazil, where passion runs wild and critics tend to be quite impulsive, basing their analysis mostly on a match-to-match basis. Still, all that adversity only made Jonas stronger. The following year, the Brazilian almost doubled his numbers, going from 24 goals to 42. Memes made him famous and exposed him as a failure, but those who watched his performances day in and day out had no choice but to be completely mesmerized. He silenced his critics, he turned his critics into crickets, and at the ripe age of 26, Jonas took his boldest step, moving to Europe to represent Valencia. Sure, it wasn't the La Liga winning Champions League challenging Valencia from the 2000s, but there were still much higher expectations than what you see at that club nowadays. If joining Grêmio after failing at Santos was high pressure, then I don't know what to call joining a historic Spanish side to replace the legendary David Villa. But this time, pressure didn't affect Jonas in the slightest. In his first half season, the Brazilian helped guide Valencia back to another third place finish, and in his first full season, he did the same with flying colors, scoring many important goals, including a hat-trick in the Champions League. Over the next 2 seasons, Jonas tried his best to make up for Valencia's gradual decline with 29 goals in 89 matches. However, it reached a point where the Brazilian knew that if he didn't leave the sinking ship, he would go down with it. Jonas had a weak second half of the 2013-14 season, and with the arrival of Nuno Espírito Santo came a need for fresh faces. As a result, the 30-year-old striker was in surplus to requirements. If that had been the end of his story, in my view, it would have been quite disappointing. Jonas could only debut for Brazil after moving to Europe, despite putting up incredible numbers while at Grêmio. Even during the brief period when he was considered an option for Brazil, Jonas only played in friendlies, always falling behind Joe, Fred and Leandro Damião in the pecking order. To be fair, Jonas played many friendlies because Brazil was already qualified for the 2014 World Cup as hosts. However, his disappointing second half of the 2013-14 season ended up costing him not only his place at Valencia, but also a spot in Brazil's squad for the biggest tournament in the world. I'm sure that at that point, his confidence was at an all-time low. I mean, after such an unlikely rise, was this the payoff? But seemingly out of nowhere, Benfica came calling. Without a club, and after the transfer window had already closed, at a time when few were still looking for deals, Jonas became part of one of the greatest masterstrokes in recent Portuguese football history. Benfica had lost Cardoso and Rodrigo and only had Lima as a reliable, high-quality option. So, they decided to sign the most famous outcast in Spain. Little did Jonas know that the greatest love story of his career was about to begin. Wearing the Benfica shirt, the striker quickly secured an undisputed starting position. With little competition from players like Derlei and Jara, and Benfica struggling more in their push for back-to-back titles, Pistolas wasted no time in showcasing his talent, technical skill and finishing ability. A hat-trick, 6 braces, goals in almost every game, a near-perfect partnership with Lima, and in the end, the championship that seemed so unlikely after Porto's immense investment. Jonas was on top of the world. He narrowly missed out on a top scorer award, but he was more loved than ever before. And then came the odd summer of 2015, where there was only one protagonist, the inevitable Jorge Jesus. The then Benfica manager traded the Eagles for their city rival Sporting, something that certainly didn't sit well with Jonas. To make matters worse, Benfica endured an awful start under Rui Vitória, losing 3 matches against Sporting in a short period and falling behind in the title race. But over time, Jonas emerged as the club's saving grace, forming a lethal partnership with Gaetan, Pizzi and Mitroglou. This not only helped him reach his highest ever goal tally of 36, along with 16 assists, but also secured the league title once again. As a rival, Jonas would make me sick. He was magnetic to the goal, classy in his touch, and had facial expressions capable of eliciting the most vicious rage from his opponents. Whenever it seemed like Benfica was about to draw points, there was their white knight Jonas, saving them just in time. I will never forget Benfica's trip to Estádio do Bessa. How inefficient they were, how things weren't clicking, and with the referee about to blow the final whistle, Jonas scored the goal to keep Benfica in pole position to win the league. This was Jonas at his best. A clutch player who carried Benfica on his back even when the Eagles were struggling. As a biased fan, I simply attributed their success to corrupt refereeing. But the more I look into it, the more I have to admit that Jonas was simply phenomenal. He was Benfica's Ronaldo. He won matches with his goals, his assists, and sometimes even with his mind games. He struck fear into his opponents, and despite his thin frame, he looked menacing and unbreakable. But looks can be deceiving. You see, Jonas carried Benfica on his back, but do you know what happens when you carry a heavy load for a long time? Eventually, you're bound to break, and Jonas was familiar with injuries. Coupled with him being 30, his history with injuries was the main argument skeptical commentators brought up when he first set foot in Portugal. And now, those worries turn into reality. At the beginning of the 16-17 season, Jonas was still crucial to Benfica's Super Cup win. but he then had to undergo ankle surgery. At the time, it was nothing major, but the problem was that the tissue wasn't healing. As soon as Benfica thought he was ready to come back, Jonas' body simply failed him. It took him 4 months, practically the first half of the season, to make a full return. But just 2 months later, he'd be back on the shelf again. This time with a back problem that still haunts him to this day. Jonas was never fully fit that season. However, just like another magical player from Benfica's past, Pistolas was strategically used in Benfica's most important matches and only deployed when Benfica needed a miracle. And so, with the help of 2 other talented strikers, an injured Jonas guided Benfica to their first ever tetra. Despite having had magnificent teams in the past with world-class players like Julinho, Águas, Eusébio or Chalana in different eras, Benfica had never been able to conquer 4 consecutive league titles. This was absolutely groundbreaking and opened the door to the possibility of matching the record for consecutive titles achieved by Porto in 1999. Though that never came to fruition, it wasn't because of Jonas. Even though we knew his body was giving up on him, Jonas tried his hardest to drag a patched up Benfica squad devoid of stars to the finish line. But he could no longer do it on his own. The Brazilian had one last hurrah. He scored 37 goals, his biggest tally ever. He doubled his minutes from the previous year, but that was it. Benfica's board simply shot themselves in the foot by selling half of their best players and failing to invest in proper replacements, but I'll leave that for another video. In the next year, Jonas' back became much more than a simple football injury. It became something that prevented him from enjoying a painless life. Jonas couldn't stand for too long, let alone run around the pitch. His minutes became even more limited, much more so than in 16-17. Benfica fans knew his time was up. But there wasn't any reason to cry, because while Jonas was approaching his final touch of a ball, a magician was blossoming in his shadow. By all intents and purposes, Felix was the MVP of Benfica's Reconquista in 1819. He had inherited the class, the awareness and the efficient touch of Jonas, so at first glance, Benfica appeared to be in safe hands for the foreseeable future. Who am I kidding? It's never easy to say goodbye, especially to a legend like Jonas. Benfica isn't just any club. They aren't a small team that finds an elite player once in a blue moon. Throughout my lifetime, Benfica had Nuno Gomes, Saviola, Cardoso and Lima, but Jonas was special. He had the touch of a superstar. He was clinical, always in the right place at the right time, and if your team allowed him the ball in the final third of the pitch, you knew he'd either score a whirly, cop an assist, or come really close to both scenarios. He was smart like a fox. He got into opponents' sets, and as a rival, that fucking pissed me off. But now, looking back at his career, at his complete trajectory, I see a humble guy. I don't see a hater or a weasel. I see a talented boy who, ironically, was never really in the right place at the right time throughout his career. He might have done exactly that on the pitch, but I feel like he exploded way too late to be recognized globally, and even by his own country. I'm not sure if this video piqued the curiosity of any Brazilians, but in my opinion, Jonas was completely wasted by his country. He could have been the consistent, lethal finisher they sorely missed from 2012 until 2016, but he was never given enough chances to stand out. He was never given the confidence or love he received in Lisbon, and so, in 2019, Jonas Pistolas quietly retired without too much fuss, now wanting to take attention away from an iconic league title win and move back to where he always wanted to be, alongside his family. 5 years later, Benfica has yet to find a love figure like him. The Eagles have only won 1 league title and are dealing with major internal issues and a lot of division on whether club legend Rui Costa should remain as president or not. Jonas, on the other hand, is enjoying the life he always wanted to have. Peaceful days alongside his elderly parents, chilling in his custom pool, away from all the drama and haters like teenage me. So Jonas, I know you're not watching this, but you weren't overrated. You were just fucking amazing, and honestly, I was just pissed my club couldn't find a striker who could win as matches like you did for Benfica. You deserve much more, but at least you always go down in history as one of Liga Portugal's best players of the 21st century. What do you think? Is Jonas the best Benfica player of this century? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to drop the usual Throne Hates Benfica comments. This time, the most creative one will get pinned. In all seriousness, feel free to drop a like if you enjoy my analysis, and subscribe to see more videos about Portuguese football next time you open your feed. Thanks for watching till the end, I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the comments.